Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. I've been asked by a number of people some questions with respect to the Blu-ray label called Kino Studio Classics, or Kino. Do I collect Kino? Do I have Kino Blu-rays, etc.? I've been asked this by a number of people, and I was thinking about this, and it's actually a very interesting question, a very timely one, because of a number of upcoming Kino titles that will be released very soon. I'm very excited about. And so I thought it might be a good opportunity just to talk a little bit about Kino, and in particular this line of titles, or this genre of film that I'm really excited about. So the short answer is that yes, I do have Kino titles. I'm not a collector of them in the sense that I don't have all of the Kino releases or anything like that, but I do have a number of the titles. So, for example, I have a number of the titles. I have the Kino titles that are the Alfred Hitchcock films, for example, like Murder, Lifeboat, their blackmail release, Under Capricorn, Paradine Case. Under Capricorn, incidentally, has a really great commentary track by Kat Ellinger, and so one of the best commentary tracks I've listened. I love Kat Ellinger commentary tracks, and incidentally, it's right here. So if you're interested in discovering or rediscovering what is a very interesting film in the context of Alfred Hitchcock's career, take a look at that. And the Kat Ellinger commentary alone is worth the price of admission because it's brilliant. But those are just some examples of those films. But there are other titles that I'm very excited about at the moment, and they are the films that are adaptations of the works of Agatha Christie. And now it's the end of August, and some of you may know that Kino, I believe, is going to be releasing at the start of September a number of Agatha Christie adaptations. In other words, film adaptations based off of the novels by Agatha Christie. So I'm very excited about those. So I understand Death on the Nile with Peter Ustinov, and Evil Under the Sun, also with Peter Ustinov as Hercule Poirot. And then there's also has Diana Rigg in that film in a very memorable role, directed by Guy Hamilton. Very interesting film. I love that film very much. And then also there is The Mirror Cracked, which is the film with Angela Lansbury as Miss Marple, and it's based off the book The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side. And it has Elizabeth Taylor as Marina Gregg. Very interesting adaptation. So I'm very excited about those. But Kino has released a number of Agatha Christie adaptations before. And so I have a number of them. For instance, there's Witness for the Prosecution, which also I have on the, here it is, the Eureka Masters of Cinema. I love this film so much. Very excited about. I love this film very much. And there's also other films they've released. They've released Ordeal by Innocence. This is a very kind of an underrated film. I think it has its share of detractors more than its fans, but I must admit that when I saw it again, I was so taken with the film. It has a real drive and essence, and it feels like it has one of the things that people, I think, criticize is the musical score. It has this jazzy score, which some people think is a little bit of a mismatch with the film itself. And I think for some of the sequences, perhaps I would find myself agreeing with that assessment. However, there are other moments in the film where I think the score works very well. It has almost a kind of, giallo-esque type of feel. It reminds me a little bit of some of the early Goblin work, where we had Goblin and jazzy scores. For instance, Argento's film Deep Red had some moments of Goblin that had some very driving jazz scores. Well, this reminded me quite a lot of that kind of feel and vibe in a thriller murder mystery. And so I was very surprised at how much I liked this film a lot more watching it now, back versus when I first saw it as a kid on VHS when I was living in the United Kingdom. But that's another example. And also there is this film. I have the Kino Blu-ray. I just misplaced it somewhere. It's somewhere in this room. But there's this film Endless Night. Now, as I say, it's also available on Kino, which I have somewhere. But there's this version as well, which is the Powerhouse Indicator version from the UK. The features are slightly different, which is why I decided to get both of them. But I love this film so much. Endless Night is a very, very great work by Agatha Christie, and it's adapted very well in this film. Hugh Bennett and Hayley Mills star in this film, and Britt Eklund star in this film, and it's like it's like kitchen sink drama meets Italian thriller. So I really think this is an underrated gem. It's so great. It's really great. And so I should say also that I've been a huge fan of Agatha Christie books and also the adaptations, since I was a little kid. When I've mentioned this before perhaps, but when I was quite young, around, third grade or so, my family moved from the United States to the United Kingdom. And I remember when we first arrived in the UK, during that first month or so, perhaps, my mom took me to the local W.H. Smith in Guildford, Surrey. And it was on the High Street. And it was on the left-hand side of the High Street as you walk down a ways, if I remember correctly. And I remember when you walked in, one of the first things you could find is a stack of Fontana paperbacks of Agatha Christie books. And there were these different colors and interesting cover art, and they were about this big. And they were £2.50 per one paperback, if I remember correctly. And I remember my mother getting me, what was it? I want to say it was Poirot's Early Cases, because that was a collection of short stories featuring Hercule Poirot. And my mom got it for me. I read through them, and I was so captivated. I was hooked. And then from there, I wanted to read as many of the books as possible. And so I read them, and I can't say that I understood everything, because I didn't, and there were a lot of things that went over my head. But still, it was just the thrill of the mystery and a kind of a puzzle box, all the clues, and trying to figure out what was going on. It was really quite extraordinary. And I fell in love with the world of Agatha Christie. And then around that time, I watched... that was around the time that I remember the BBC had broadcast the first of two parts of the Joan Hickson Miss Marple series, Sleeping Murder. And I remember this. I remember watching TV one day, and again, this was when we were living in our house in Guildford. And on TV, there was a promo for Sleeping Murder Part 1 on the BBC, and I was fascinating. I didn't know this series before. Again, I was a little kid then, but I saw Joan Hickson, and I saw the what was going on, and I said, my goodness, I have to watch this. And so we had a VCR, and so I recorded it, and then I saw it, and I was hooked. And there was part 1, and then the conclusion would be presented in part 2, and you had to wait. I want to say maybe a week or so. I forget exactly. Maybe it was a week, but I remember it was a considerable amount of time. And so during that wait, we recorded part 1, and I watched that over and over and over again, trying to get all the clues that I could. It was the whole thing with the house and Gwenda and Giles and Miss Marple, and then meeting Dr. Kennedy, and what was it? Cover her face, mine eyes dazzle. She died young. Right, the Duchess of Malfi, and all this. And I was a kid, and I was thinking to myself, what's the Duchess of Malfi? What does this mean? Why does it cover her face? Mine eyes dazzle. Why does it say mine instead of mine? And I was thinking all of this stuff, but a lot of it was very confusing to me, I admit. But at the same time, it was like a new world was opening up before me, and this wonderful portrayal by Joan Hickson as Miss Marple essentially sealed the deal. And then from there, I just watched as many of the episodes that I could, and so that meant that was Miss Marple. I now understand had already been established with some earlier episodes that I didn't see. So there was A Murder is Announced, and Pocket Full of Rye, and The Body in the Library, which I hadn't seen. But I did see The Body in the Library on a VHS rental, if I remember. And so as soon as I got hooked on Miss Marple, the BBC series, we went to the local video store, again in the UK, and they had The Body in the Library, and so I was able to watch that. And I thought it was a very interesting, kind of scary. It was actually very scary for me to watch, but there's a particular moment at the very end it's chills, and there's a particular look that a character gives. I was so scared, and even now when I watch that part in The Body in the Library, I get chills even now. But that was the first, I guess, season, if you will, and then I watched The Sleeping Murder, which was the second season, if you will, or it was a new series, if you will, and then from there I seem to recall the adaptations of Nemesis, and let's see, it would have been maybe at Bertram's Hotel, I want to say, perhaps, or and then later there are more adaptations like 450 from Paddington, and I think I maybe mentioned in a past video, but that was where I was fascinated with the use of the word tontine. And I was watching that as a kid, and I think, what is a tontine? But that's how I tried to look up the word tontine. So that was really interesting. And then later adaptations came forward. You know, They Do It with Mirrors and A Caribbean Mystery, which of course had been adapted for television in the United States a few years earlier with Helen Hayes as Miss Marple. And so you had, for instance, They Do It with Mirrors, what was it? Or was Murder with Mirrors, with Helen Hayes and Betty Davis and John Mills, and that was an interesting adaptation in and of itself. And then earlier, I think, was a Caribbean, it was Caribbean Mystery as well. And so you had these interesting adaptations all over the place, which was really exciting, again, during the 80s. And then, of course, before this, but films that I was so fascinated by was the big screen adaptations. And so Murder on the Orient Express with Albert Finney, directed by Sidney Lumet, and then you had Peter Ustinov, who took over the role of Poirot in the later adaptations of, say, Death on the Nile and Evil Under the Sun, which are really great. And I remember watching Death on the Nile when I was a kid on TV, and I recorded it, or I tried to record it on TV. And for some reason, like it was on tape, and then maybe a good chunk of the middle was accidentally recorded over. And so whenever I saw Death on the Nile on the tape, I'd see the beginning, I'd see what would happen, and then suddenly there would be a bit that was missing, and then they'd catch up with the film. So I'd always remember the film with a little bit of that was a bit of a blank spot for me. But later, I remedied that by getting a DVD of it and then watching it over and over and over again, of course. But that's such a great one, and Evil Under the Sun too. I'm so excited about that. I love that the champagne bubbly feel of the film, and the sunlight and the joy and the kind of playfulness of the proceedings. And Peter Ustinov was delightful. There's a moment where he has a little bit of a trick with an egg, and he's trying to impress someone. And there's also a moment when you see him swimming. And I just love these character moments of Peter Ustinov as Poirot. Of course, there were other Ustinov films, of course. There was Appointment with Death, which came a little bit later. And then there were the TV adaptations as well. Dead Man's Folly and 13 at Dinner. 13 at Dinner, of course, is very famous because it had not only Faye Dunaway, there's that, and then... but that's also very famous. 13 at Dinner with Peter Ustinov is also very famous because it features David Suchet as Chief Inspector Japp, of all people. And so I thought that was a very interesting role. Of course, then a few years later, David Suchet would return to the world of Agatha Christie, not as the Chief Inspector, of course, but as Agatha Christie's Poirot. And that was first broadcast on TV, again, when I was living in the UK. And I can still remember that day or that week when it was broadcast or was about to be broadcast. My friends and I were so excited for this. We were kind of fans of Christie. And it was really hyped up, and it didn't disappoint. It was so splendid, and all the everything was established, and it was great. And it was what were those episodes? The Adventure of the Clapham Cook, I think it was, and just amazing stuff. And from there, essentially history was made in the world of Agatha Christie adaptations. And so I can go on and on about Agatha Christie adaptations, and perhaps I've gone on too much right now, so I apologize for that. But if you are interested in a great discussion book on Agatha Christie and the film adaptations or TV adaptations, there's a great book here by Mark Aldrich called Agatha Christie on Screen. This is great stuff, essential stuff. It talks about some of the films, or talks about the films that I did, plus a whole wealth of others. And so if you are interested, Mark Aldrich's book is definitely one to get. But my point, just bringing it back full circle, is that, again, Kino will be releasing, I think at the beginning of September, so the Peter Ustinov film, Death on the Nile, and then Evil Under the Sun, and then The Mirror Cracked, again with Angela Lansbury as Miss Marple. So I am very, very excited about that. I've already pre-ordered them, and so when they are released, hopefully they will arrive, and I'm looking forward to those very much. And hopefully, I don't know if and when it could happen, but hopefully in North America, hopefully we might see a Blu-ray release of the Sidney Lumet film, Murder on the Orient Express. I would love that. I think that would be absolutely fantastic, because I've mentioned that film before many times. That is one of my absolute favorite films from a story that I absolutely adore. Agatha Christie's Murder on the Orient Express, the novel, is perfection. And I've read that book so many times, and I've seen the film so many times, and they're a little bit different. There are some differences, but I think they each exist in their own planes very comfortably. And that would be great to have one day on a Blu-ray in North America. I know it exists in other territories on Blu-ray, but I have the DVD of it. But maybe one day that would be so fantastic. But oh well, I can't complain, because there's already such a wealth of access of Agatha Christie adaptations going forward. So I didn't even mention the recent BBC adaptations of Agatha Christie works. I think perhaps one of the most interesting ones of those. I mean, there are many interesting ones. I think Ordeal by Innocence, the ABC Murders with John Malkovich, and Witness for the Prosecution as well. But I think the one that really got to me was that adaptation of And Then There Were None. Wow. I do have some feelings about it. in certain ways that could be seen as being some criticisms, perhaps. But I think overall the effect that it had on me was quite brutal and very startling and very cold, which I think is befitting that story. If you know that story, it is very, very, very tough indeed. But anyway, my friends, I'm sorry for going on so long. I hope you can forgive me. But anyway, that's just a brief answer, or maybe not so brief, response or comments about my feelings about Kino. And so I'm a big fan, as you can see, in particular with with certain of their releases. So. But anyway, my friends, thank you so much. And do you have any Kino Studio Classic release favorites that you have? If so, please let me know, and please let us all know, because it's a really great label, and I think it has so much wealth and variety. So if you have any recommendations for us or suggestions or your favorite Kino releases, please let me know in the comments section below. As always, I'd love to hear what it is you have to say. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great, great movies. Thank you so much again for your time, my friends, and cheers.